Sometimes in a movie, you just need a little CGI acting assistance. What you don't need is monstrous wrestler-scorpion hybrids, terrifying puppet babies, and whatever it was that was going on with Ryan Reynolds' Green Lantern. 2009's Terminator Salvation is the only one of the 6 franchise films not to feature Arnold Schwarzenegger as the Terminator, which would seem to be a pretty big baseline requirement for a Terminator movie. Even so, Terminator Salvation exists, sans Schwarzenegger, and the movie works around the absence of the franchise's face and biggest star by recreating his likeness digitally. This T-800 is portrayed by Austrian actor and bodybuilder Roland Kickinger, who actually played Schwarzenegger in a prior film. In a key fight sequence with the T-800, Schwarzenegger's face is digitally superimposed over Kickinger's body. The final result goes about as well as you'd expect such an ambitious and complex CGI effect to go in a McGee-directed 2009 movie, which is to say, not well at all. Could Martin Campbell's 2011 Green Lantern movie be the worst superhero movie ever made? That's possible, thanks to its bungling not only of the Green Lantern comics, but virtually all rules of action filmmaking, quality storytelling, and good taste. Criticizing its poor visual effects is pretty much beating a dead horse at this point. But still, no list of terrible CGI actor replacements would be complete without citing this movie's utterly sloppy digital rendering of suited-up Hal Jordan.
Ah, green! Wow. I know, right?
The character suits in Green Lantern were infamously created and added in digitally instead of being actually worn by the actors on set, which creates the bizarre effect of watching Ryan Reynolds' actual head seemingly float above a flimsy mass of green CGI. As if that baffling artistic decision wasn't bad enough, several shots cut out the middleman entirely and just have Jordan's head animated with CGI as well, effectively replacing Reynolds with a fully digital and utterly unconvincing Green Lantern. The movie's over-reliance on ham-fisted CGI was so widely hated that it's since become one of Reynolds' favorite punchlines.
You're welcome, Canada.
2013's The Hobbit: The Desolation of Smaug might be the only decent movie in Peter Jackson's bloated Hobbit trilogy, if only due to its baseline functionality as a simple, fun, and straightforward action-adventure romp. The film's various action sequences are big, well-assembled, and entertaining enough to almost recapture the technical grandeur of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. An unexpected high point is the 3-way river battle between the dwarves, the wood elves, and the orcs, which forgoes any somberness and veers into straight-up cartoon logic, carried out with delightful abandon by Jackson and his tech team. That said, even as the sequence's goofiness proves to be an asset, there's no denying that the CGI models in that sub-in for the actors during most of the wide shots feel less than lifelike. And Legolas's various showy scuffles with the orcs around the rocky riverbanks are by far the worst offender. Save for the occasional split-second cuts to Orlando Bloom looking around and shooting arrows, Jackson doesn't even try to splice in the CGI Legolas with any practical action. In shots where the shaky cam slows down enough to give us a good glimpse of the elf, he suddenly feels less like a flesh-and-blood character than the orcs. Perhaps the single most infamous example of a CGI model disastrously standing in for a real actor is the appearance of Matthias of Akkad, aka the Scorpion King in The Mummy Returns. The 2001 sequel brought back much of the original film's cast, along with a then novel addition, celebrity wrestler Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, then 29 years old and making his film acting debut. Following a brief live-action appearance in the film's prologue, the Scorpion King reappears in the movie's climax, this time transformed into a monstrous, 100% CGI human scorpion hybrid. It was modeled after Johnson's likeness, and the human part, to say the least, isn't exactly convincing. A lot of the CGI in The Mummy Returns has aged pretty well for a 2001 movie so heavy on digital wizardry. But the Scorpion King? Its final form feels so uncanny, unreal, and just plain goofy that there's no suspense to Rick O'Connell's fight with him. The movie's CGI team reportedly had limited access to Johnson due to his busy WWE schedule, resulting in a model that bears so little resemblance to the real-life Johnson that it might as well have been designed from memory. Years before Netflix came knocking at Marvel's door, Daredevil got a now infamous 2003 film adaptation, written and directed by Mark Steven Johnson and starring Ben Affleck, Jon Favreau, Jennifer Gardner, and in the movie's most inspired feat of casting, Michael Clarke Duncan as Wilson Fisk. Barely breaking even financially, Johnson's Daredevil was heavily criticized by fans for failing to capture the spirit of the comics, beginning with an overly silly and fantastical tone. That lack of seriousness and grounding was reflected in many of the film's technical aspects as well, including the CGI work used to bring Affleck's Daredevil to life and some of the more elaborate and acrobatic stunts. Rather than prioritize live-action stunt work and choreography, the film frequently resorts to replacing Affleck wholesale with an all-digital version of the suited-up man without fear, and it rarely looks functional, let alone convincing. Shots of Daredevil leaping through rooms, up walls, and out of buildings consistently look like video game cutscenes, with a 3D figurine suddenly replacing Affleck as if we wouldn't notice. 2016's Rogue One, A Star Wars Story is notable for several reasons. It was the first Star Wars theatrical film to tell a lateral story, the first not to feature John Williams as a composer, and it ultimately became the basis for one of the strongest Star Wars spin-offs ever in the Disney Plus series, Andor. But the single most notorious aspect of Rogue One may have been its use of a digital recreation of the late Peter Cushing. The British actor who died in 1994 played Grand Moff Tarkin in the original 1977 movie. Rather than recast the part, the makers of Rogue One opted to seek permission from Cushing's estate to create a CGI model of him, and superimposed that model over English actor Guy Henry in post-production. As a result, several stretches of Rogue One are dominated by a stiff, uncanny version of Tarkin that looks and moves just enough like Cushing to make it glaringly obvious that it's not Cushing there at all.
Failure will find you explaining why to a far less patient audience.
In many ways, that ethically and cinematically dubious choice opened the door for the ongoing normalization of a state-authorized pseudo-necromancy via digital effects. And to think they could have just cast a new actor. Of course, there are some instances in which the choice to create digital versions of late actors is at least informed by more than why the heck not, like when actors pass away midway through production. When Oliver Reed died with several scenes left to shoot in 2000's Gladiator, the problem was solved by superimposing his face over a body double, so seamlessly that you might not even have noticed it. In the case of Furious 7, though, the work of completing an actor's performance via CGI was much more conspicuous. Unlike Gladiator, which wisely kept its digitally assisted scenes shrouded in shadow, Furious 7 all but flaunted its CGI recreation of the late Paul Walker in several key shots. Several of those shots, in fairness, are seamless. But director James Wan was confident enough to place the digital Brian O'Connor, created by placing Walker's face over the bodies of his brothers Caleb and Cody, and/or actor John Brotherton, square at the center of the film's emotional climax.
Hey, thought you could leave without saying goodbye.
The intention to honor Walker's memory is understandable and noble. But in practice, the shot produces a poorly timed brush with the uncanny valley that distracts from the intended emotion. Black Panther stands not only as one of Marvel's best movies, but as one of the most expansive and impressive technical feats in the whole MCU. From its costumes to its art direction, cinematography, elaborate stunt choreography, and gorgeous musical score, Ryan Coogler's 2018 Afrofuturist epic is a feat that puts many Hollywood blockbuster movies to shame. It's no wonder that it made Oscar history, becoming the first MCU movie to actually win, in more than one category no less. But it's also not much of a surprise that its visual effects weren't even nominated, as they're notably the film's only technically substandard aspect. The generally rubbery and weightless CGI of Black Panther sometimes poses a problem in the film's otherwise lushly immersive design. But the one moment in which it actively compromises the film's storytelling is during the final fight between Chadwick Boseman's T'Challa and Michael B. Jordan's Killmonger in the Wakandan vibranium mines. With both characters wearing full bodysuits, the film opts to momentarily replace the performers with all digital models to facilitate an elastic, gravity-defying action sequence. But due to shoddy CGI work, the end result feels less like the physically expressive finale to a tragic interpersonal conflict and more like watching two characters duke it out in a PlayStation 3 fighting game. Pierce Brosnan's 4 films as James Bond marked the raucous, sometimes chaotic transition period between the franchise's slick, campy Cold War spy thriller era and the blooming Hollywood blockbuster age of the 90s and 2000s.
Been busy, have we, Mr. Bond?
Just surviving, Mr. Chang. Just surviving.
As the franchise's set pieces became more bombastic and maximalist, they also became more reliant on CGI of wildly varying quality. And Brosnan's final Bond film, 2002's Die Another Day, features perhaps the most regrettable example of the series overreaching technologically in the name of would-be spectacle. We're referring, of course, to the tidal wave surfing scene, when Bond is escaping Gustav Graves' Iceland facility while being pursued by the ice-melting Icarus satellite. Most of the scene features a live-action Brosnan surrounded by CGI water and glaciers, accomplished through blue-screen chroma keying. And those stretches look silly enough. But then, at key points, the sequence has Bond pull off gravity-defying feats by replacing him with a CGI model of Brosnan. Even seen from behind, the model in those shots is entirely unconvincing.
Global warming is a terrible thing.
It's one of the most notorious instances of overly ambitious CGI ruining an otherwise engaging early 2000s action fest. No wonder this series immediately reverted back to a more grounded and practical style for the subsequent Daniel Craig installments. One of the most egregious examples of a human character in a live-action movie being rendered through bad CGI involved no flesh and blood actors at all. It did involve a puppet, for what that's worth, but said puppet could not, by any stretch whatsoever, be called anything close to human.
Chuck Esme is one of the most grotesque animatronic babies, ever to not be seen on film.
In fact, the real conundrum when looking at baby Renesmee in 2012's The Twilight Saga Breaking Dawn Part 2 is determining whether its ultimate on-screen form was better or worse than its would-be practical conception. To be clear, the CGI baby is a complete catastrophe as far as digital design of human characters is concerned. Even conceding that, there's supposed to be something uncanny and inhuman about Bella and Edward's human-vampire hybrid infant. The CGI baby Renesmee looks like she's not even there. Like people aren't cradling anything at all in their arms. But the digital Renesmee might still have been an improvement over the filmmaker's original plan to bring the baby to life via animatronic puppet. CGI Renesmee is at least a cute enough baby, even if she doesn't look real at all. The ultimately scrapped puppet Renesmee, meanwhile, is outright terrifying. The decaying quality of CGI in the post-2019 MCU has been the topic of much discussion among fans and skeptics alike. And the absolute worst of MCU visual effects may well have been 2023's Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania.
Surprised to see me?
Yeah?
A largely lifeless, unengaging, and bureaucratic film from top to bottom, Quantumania features some of the least polished CGI in the last few years of comic book cinema, as demonstrated by many, if not most of the shots featuring Paul Rudd's Scott Lang in his Ant-Man suit. During the power core scene in particular, the effects feel at least a full decade older than they are, resulting in the questionable experience of nothing but Rudd's center stage figure, and sometimes nothing but his head, and sometimes not even that, actually feeling real and tangible. That's far from the only set piece in the movie with those problems. Quantumania often actively gives off the impression that the filmmakers weren't even concerned about making it look good. It's no secret to anyone that 2023's The Flash is a terrible movie, James Gunn's love for it notwithstanding. Every new viewing of it, if you're willing to put yourself through multiple viewings, reveals new layers of mind-boggling badness.
Whoa.
On a first watch, you may find yourself too distracted by the mushy, headache-inducing confusion and visual incoherence of the movie's action sequences to notice the frequency with which The Flash resorts to needless CGI actor replacement even in quiet moments. It's easy to gawk, for instance, at the amateurish staging and low-grade VFX in the scene where Supergirl fights off the Siberian guards, which features plenty of bad CGI replacement in its own right. But take a closer look at the scene's very last shot, in which the heroes are rescued by Batman's aircraft, and you'll notice that both the suited and the plainclothes version of Barry Allen are stiff, rubbery, barely shaded digital models. Poor CGI and wild stunts and fast-moving action sequences is one thing, But they couldn't even get 2 human stand-ins into Barry's clothes for that simple 15-second shot?